Welcome to another edition of Tales from the Heart, Patient Edition. Today we're going to be speaking with Lekeshia Henderson, and she's going to share her story and her family's story of finding out about hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and getting involved in activism and awareness raising. So, Lekeshia, welcome to Tales from the Heart. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Lisa. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I am good. It's been another crazy start of a crazy day for the HCMA, but all good things coming our way. Oh, I rhymed. Who knew? I
You
might need that as
did.
a clip, Joey. Hint. Okay. So we've asked a number of our HCMA ambassadors, which is a program that's been running for about a year now. And there are about 15, 18 people involved in the program spreading awareness of HCM through social media. And Lakeisha is a volunteer under that program. So thanks for that. So tell us a little bit about who you are and why you got involved with the HCMA.
Yes, ma'am. So my name is Lekeshia Henderson. Like she said, I am a lot of things. I have a lot of titles, but one that I am most proud of is being a mother and a wife. I have 4 children, and I've been married for 10 years now, as of the 13th of this month. But I also am a entrepreneur, business owner. I own and operate AID. It's an administrative professional solutions business. And one of the reasons why I became involved with the HCMA is after I lost my brother, unfortunately, to sudden cardiac arrest back in November 2021. And as I started looking into his condition, I stumbled across the 4HCMA.org website, and it really caught me because that was the one location that taught me the most about how and why I just lost my brother. And then I saw, after visiting the website multiple times, just trying to make sure I understood what just happened to my brother, I saw that you all were looking for volunteers. And at that moment, I really felt like it was something I needed to be able for me to grieve. I grieve a little different than people. Most people, I think everybody does, but for
Absolutely.
me, gaining understanding was a big part of my grieving process, and it led me here. And I've been here since then, and I've enjoyed the journey, and it's taught me so much.
Well, we're sorry for the loss of your brother, obviously. As it turned out, as we unraveled his story, there was a diagnosis,
Hmm.
but there wasn't really risk assessment performed,
No.
and there was no defibrillator implanted, and his care was not optimized. And we don't want to see that happen to anybody else. You've lost a brother, I've lost a sister, and we don't want to lose our siblings. They're supposed to be there for us for the whole run. And when
Hmm.
they leave early, there's a hole in our heart forever, and we all do grieve differently. So I really appreciate your acknowledging a form of grief is activism. It's getting educated and saying, there's a problem I've just become aware of. I don't want others to find out the way I did. And in that, we have a lot in common because that's where the HCMA actually came from. So, this conversation, we thought we would focus around the importance of family screenings and genetic screenings and how it can work in different ways for different families. So, I am from Jersey and I grew up in the suburbs and I happen to be a white girl. I know my perspective of the world, and mine is different than other people who live in other parts of the country, other parts of the world, other genders, ethnic groups, racial groups, philosophical beliefs. We all come to decisions differently, and we have to respect the space that we come from.
Hmm.
So, understanding when my sister passed in 95 and the things that I did to figure out the why went one way. It's 2022, 3. What year did your brother passed?
2021.
2021. So in 2021, you come to the world from your perspective with your lived experience. What do you feel is the most important thing for people from your community, however you define that? What do you want them to know about hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and why they should understand what genetic heart muscle diseases are?
I feel that for my community, the most important thing to know um, is that heart disease, for one, is the leading cause of death. Um, and what the term "what you don't know won't hurt you" is not true. What uh,
That's a great one. That is so
um,
true.
it is so not true. So what if you don't know, you can die, and then it leaves a hole for your family of trying to figure out, what happened, why it happened, and who's at risk. So while we are living and breathing, we need to know what we're at risk for. And a part of that is actually having the conversations to figure out where to start. Does your mother, your father have? What have they struggled with, and their parents before them? So in our community, it's in my community, um, it's really difficult to have that conversation because it's looked upon as depressing or gloomy, or why are we talking about this? I've had pushback in my own family because they don't want to talk about it, because it comes off not positive. But it's important. It is important. It really can save your life. It can save your children's lives. It can save the lives of your future that's not here yet.
That's beautiful. Okay. So you said a lot of very important things there. And I don't want to miss any of those moments. Um, it's gloomy. It's not a fun topic. Why are we talking about something scary? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have some news. Nobody gets out of here alive, and we all want to stay around as long as we possibly can. So the only way to do that is to understand where your individual risks are. We don't want to make people sick. We don't want to cause problems. We want to empower people to solve problems before they occur. And if you can take a proactive step towards understanding your individual risks and for what, then you can live a healthier, longer, more productive life. So the topic is scary. It is a little gloomy. But if we peel back the onion and we talk about it, you might cry a little bit,
Mhm.
but then you become educated and enlightened and empowered. And isn't that what we want to see happen?
Yes, that word "empowered" is really important, because since learning about what my brother went through, I felt really empowered when I had to take this own journey myself to understand what risk I might have. And that form of empowerment really did make a difference when I was going into the doctor's offices, when they were telling me, "Oh, everything's fine. Everything looks normal," but I knew what questions to ask to understand. So, what exactly is fine? Because when I hear "fine" and "perfect," those are two different things. So if it's fine, that means there's something there that's not concerning at this moment. So what does that look like? What does that mean? So it helped me to um, really challenge my professional team to make sure by the time I walked out of there, I was educated and not just okay.
So, one of the things that we believe very strongly in at the HCMA is the concept of shared decision making. And shared decision making when you're doing family screening is really important. So, let's just talk through a situation like yours when you would contact the HCMA and say, "Hi, my brother has just passed away and he had HCM, but he had a cardiac arrest, no defibrillator." So we went through our intake process with you and we tried to understand what his situation was and who else in the family might be affected. So we looked to first degree family members, so your parents, your siblings, and then depending upon which siblings might have had children, those children might need to be screened as well. So you go, I feel like the flight attendant, if you're watching the vodcast, not the podcast, you go up, over, and down. It's like the little wing signs when the flight attendant is showing you where the exit doors are, right? So we go up the
Mhm.
family tree, we go over, and we go down. And if you think about that, that's how genetics flow. And we want to make sure that if there is a genetic disease in the family, we're able to identify it. Now, the problem with HCM is genetic testing isn't where we need it to be yet. It's not 100%. We don't know all the genes yet. So we can look at family screening. So after we had our conversation, it might have happened before we had our conversation. Can you walk us through what screening you did for yourself and your family, your immediate family?
Yes. So once I did my intake, and from that intake, I learned that it there was an option for me to have a genetic test, and through the HCMA, it was offered at almost no cost to me, and that was like one of the first steps. That was the first step I took before I even got in with a cardiologist, because my before my brother passed, I had never seen a cardiologist before.
Mm.
I didn't think I needed to, because I what I understood was, since I didn't have anything like high blood pressure or anything like that, I didn't need a cardiologist. So I did the I did the arrhythmia and cardiomyopathy panel through Invite, which Julie, shout out to Julie. She helped navigate that for me. She sent me the emails that I needed, and I got that done. And it it provided me the opportunity. Once the results came back in, I did get the document. They sent it to my email, which I still have. I still keep up with. It's very useful. While mine said that it did not detect or identify a gene known for HCMA. I mean, so for HCM, it did, however, say that I had some form of a unknown variant. And later down my journey, I found out that that variant could be tied to some form of a heart block. So, which gave me some anxiety. So I was like, "Wait, what did you just say?" But the process was very simple. Um, I did. An individual from Invite reached out to me. They talked with me, gathered some information. Same kind. It was almost like the intake with the HCMA,
Mhm.
and they even offer for me, if I like a more detailed explanation of my genetic test, that I could speak with a genetic counselor through them. I didn't take that step. I didn't go there, not at this point. But they did say that once the test is done, if they ever get to the point where they can identify that unknown gene, that I would get an update from them. So that was very reassuring.
So let's talk about that term, variant of uncertain significance. For anybody who's a Princess Bride fan, it's like rodents of unusual size, it sounds like. But a variant of uncertain significance is not a normal genetic variant in the body. It's it's abnormal, but is it abnormal enough to cause a problem? So, what does that actually mean? These gene mutations are responsible for the production of different proteins. And if we don't have enough of a certain protein, the mechanism doesn't work right. The recipe's wrong. So it either has too much sugar, too little sugar, not necessarily bodily sugar, but ingredients. So there's different chemicals that are going to be caused by that genetic variant. And the variant may not be significant enough to actually alter the production of anything. It just is off, but it's still good enough. It's like an egg substitute in an egg recipe, right? So it's going to do the job, but it's just a little different. And then there's mutations that aren't doing their job or overdoing their job. And those are pathogenic mutations. We know they're underproducing, overproducing, and causing disease. But then there's ones that are just a little wonky and may or may not cause disease. Over time, we learn about them and we become more understanding of whether or not they're tied to disease in other people. So VUSs are worth following up on with specialists every few years and checking back with your genetic testing company to say, hey, Has there been anything learned about this particular marker? And they'll give you updates. So while we're in the US state, we kind of have to default to no identified mutation has been proven to be pathogenic. So we have to do cascade screening with echo, EKG, checkup with cardiologists for that line of the family tree until we can prove or disprove whether disease is present. So, did your brother have any children?
He did. He had four, three boys and one girl.
Mm,
So we are actually working. Well, so my since my brother passed, uh, my nephews are now in the custody of my mother. So my mother and I talk a lot about their health care. So she did connect them with CHOA,
mhm.
and they did go in and do their full cardiac screenings. We did ask them about genetic testing for them, all of them. But the youngest at the time, they only did the oldest two. So my brother's oldest two boys did do their genetic test. Everything came back normal for them. Their recommendation to us was not to have the screening done for the youngest one. At the time, he was, I think, 9, because his brothers seemed fine and he was not having any symptoms. So it is more than likely about time for the youngest one to go in and have that screening. I believe he'll be 12 this year. I think
Yep,
he will.
it's time for an echo, an
Mhm,
EKG, checkup with the
mhm.
cardiologist, and a reevaluation of the genetic test results.
Yeah. So
So it's
yeah, and they
time.
have not done the screening. They recommended that they did not do the screening. And while I had a conversation with my mom about it, but at the end I left it up to her for her decision, because she's the primary provider. So, but we are definitely looking out for them for any symptoms. We are definitely aware of symptoms that they may end up um, having or showing. So we're keeping a close eye on them, and I do believe it's about time for their recheck.
At this age, they should be
Second
going
or third.
about every 18 months. We used to say
Hmm.
every year, and sometimes that's a little aggressive. So 18 months. If there's been any changes, then they'll be seen a little bit more frequently. I have heard people say 5 years. No, that's too long. There's too much growth
Hmm.
time involved in that. So, the guidelines are between 1 and 3 years. So, like, every 18 months is a good guidance. I do think that people are a bit more, um, able to remember, "It's May, it's time for me to get this checked.
Hmm.
June, it's time for me to get this checked." If you don't do it on a calendar, sometimes people just forget about it. And it's
Hmm.
really important for the children of a parent who was lost to continue with screening. I cannot help but think of some of the connections to a family story that is really the inspiration for a project we're working on called the All Hearts Collaborative.
Hmm.
And there was a young man named Derek Armstead. He happened to be an African American man who was like 29 years old. He lived in Norfolk, Virginia. And turns out that he had a family history of HCM, but he didn't know it because his mom passed when he was very young. And the knowledge of his mother's cause of death was kind of lost in the family tree because she died when he was, maybe under 5 years old, and his sister was maybe 7 or 8. So, what did they know about their parents' health history? And unfortunately, when he went to the emergency room at 29 after having passed out, they didn't even look at his heart. They didn't
Hmm.
ask about his family heart health history. They didn't ask him if what his mom died of. And had they done that, they might have kept him in the hospital.
Hmm.
And when they kept him in the hospital, maybe he would have been there on the day 5 because it was 5 days after his ER visit that he had a cardiac arrest carrying his infant son up the stairs, and he
Hmm.
died.
So sad.
And I can't help but think if we really started talking about family heart health history a little bit more specifically and looking for those links when things happen and symptoms occur, that maybe
Hmm.
we could save more lives. And I think we've lost way too many. I know within, the I've been doing this 30 years almost, which makes me feel really, really old, but I've been doing this for a long time. And when we started the work of the HCMA, the only time that you would hear HCM mentioned in the Black community is Hank Gathers and Reggie Lewis. Athletes died, scary, don't want to know about it, would rather die doing what I love than never knowing. Well, the world has changed a whole lot in 30, 33 years. If you go back and you look at Hank Gather's video death, and it's all on videotape and it's horrible. The man collapses. They hold him. Nobody starts CPR. Nobody gets an AED. It's 1990. There weren't any, not in the public. And the man dies in front of everybody.
Mm.
And then 30 years later, Damar goes down on an NFL field and he's resuscitated in minutes because of good community action and a response plan that worked. Awesome. That's the difference in 30 years. But what else has happened with HCM in 30 years? And I have heard many times from Black families specifically that sports are their ticket to getting their kids the education that they want to get them and getting
Mhm.
them out to places. And I love that. But they're afraid to get screened because they're afraid that the diagnosis will stop the journey.
Mhm.
And we've learned so much about HCM that the diagnosis doesn't have to stop your athletic journey in every case. And I
Right.
bring to the forefront Jared Butler, who's playing
Mhm.
NBA basketball for the Wizards in DC with a diagnosis of HCM. He's been appropriately assessed, managed, and treated, and he stays under surveillance, and we watch him carefully, and we make sure that he gets the care that he needs. But if you are a young man, specifically a young Black man, and you're afraid to talk about your symptoms because you're afraid somebody's going to bench you, we can treat you, we can take care of you, and we can let you live the life that you want to live in almost all cases. And if we have to put a defibrillator in to protect you, okay, not a big deal. I lived with one
Mhm.
for almost 30 years. We can do this. So we can do tough things. And we have to have hard
Mhm.
conversations.
Yes.
We have to protect these young lives.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, we definitely have to have these conversations, and even with not just the conversations, but it's so important to be aware. Um, when I think about even when while we're talking about screenings, and my brother that passed, he was athletic. I mean, he was an athlete in school, and after we lost him, now we're sitting back, just all of these past events that took place symptom wise with him just went under the radar, and we didn't know to ask these questions in
Can
high
you tell
school.
us a little bit about what some of these episodes look like?
Yeah, so in high school when he would play football or sports, he had fainting spells. And he was under. We went to our pedi. Let's start.
Pediatrician.
Yeah, let's start that over. Where do I start?
Three,
Um,
2, 1.
so some of those symptoms that my brother had while he was an athlete in school was fainting. But he went to his doctor. We went to our pediatrician on a regular basis. But I guess nothing was really focused on the heart. And it's still like that today for our youth in our annual pediatric visits. They listen to your heart, they check your blood pressure, but even slight murmurs. I've heard this myself with one of my children. Oh, that's just an innocent heart murmur. She could grow out of it. But now that I know what I know, even the fainting spells that my brother had as adolescent, and my own daughter having that innocent heart murmur should have triggered a visit to a cardiologist. Um, but we didn't know our family history, and I'm still trying to piece it together now. But now that I know that my brother has passed from a actual diagnosed heart disease, when things come up, it says to me, ask more questions. Uh, do you need more than just a pediatrician seeing your child? Uh, and but it goes into so many other things, especially when we bring insurance into it,
Mm.
the process to even get to a specialist depending on your insurance. But these are questions that we need to know. Um, these are things that we need to be aware of. We have to have knowledge. And everyone can choose to sit in a room and talk about um, a family member that passed, but until somebody actually decides to be informed and to figure out what the next steps are, you'll always just keep having that reoccurring conversation until you take the steps to inform yourself, to be aware of what happened, why it happened, and who's at risk.
Excellent points. So I'm going to take a moment to dive into the murmur question.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of signs and symptoms of HCM that are very common. And when I start listing them off, anybody who's listening who doesn't know much about HCM, don't panic if any of what I said sounds like you. Just have a conversation with your doctor. Okay. So a lot of us were told we have innocent murmurs. 51% of those diagnosed with HCM were told at some point in their journey, I have an innocent murmur. So there's a difference between innocent and inconsequential. An inconsequential murmur means it's not affecting the way your heart functions. It's just making some odd sounds, either a slight leak in a valve or maybe a small hole in the heart. There's just some little quirky sounds that can be slightly abnormal. In HCM, the murmur tends to be related to something called outflow tract obstruction. And that means that the mitral valve and the septum typically are meeting and the blood is getting stuck in the bottom of the heart for a couple seconds or milliseconds, and then it breaks free. So it's this obstruction sound. Instead of lub dub, that's the way your heart's supposed to sound. It's more like a lub dub, and it has this extra sound in there. What a murmur is an abnormal sound. Why a murmur is has a lot of different meanings. So, A, if you have a murmur, you want to figure out why. Innocent or inconsequential or consequential. That's the three classifications that I use. So that's number one. Athletically induced asthma. If you are getting short of breath with exercise and you have a murmur, this is, you put the two together, you definitely need to talk to your doctor about seeing a cardiologist and maybe getting an echocardiogram. Because when you have athletically induced asthma and a murmur, it's most likely HCM under a different name. Like they're just calling it by its symptoms, not by its diagnosis. Other things that can affect people with HCM, and it's confusing because it could be anxiety. You feel your heart race out of nowhere and then it goes back away. But when your heart races, then adrenaline drops because you're nervous because your heart is racing and you don't know why. And then you kind of get this cat chasing its tail and you feel like you're having a panic attack. It could be an actual panic attack, but it could have a cardiac starting point. So figure out, why do you feel like your heart is racing? Get it worked out by your doctor. Now, if you have panic attacks, an innocent murmur, and athletically induced asthma, your likelihood of getting a membership card to the HCMA is extremely high, because when you put those together. Now let's take one other piece. If you have a family history of stroke, heart attack, but not the clinical definition of heart attack, a family myth of somebody had a heart attack under the age of 55, unexpectedly dies, or somebody who has had a history of multiple heart attacks. You want to look into why. It could be HCM, it could be coronary artery disease. Both of them are really important that you get to the bottom of. We're looking for HCM, but it might be something else. So take the message, look at that family history of atrial fibrillation, family history of heart failure, family history of heart transplant. All of these things that are going on in your family tree, you need to report as well. So we take that whole picture and we put as many pieces of the puzzle together as we possibly can, and we identify people who need to be screened. If you are diagnosed with HCM in 2024, I always check my calendar when I'm saying the dates. There is a very high likelihood that you will live to or surpass the average age of mortality in the United States, which is late 70s for men and 81 for women. So you don't have to be afraid of getting diagnosed. You have to be afraid of not getting diagnosed and having something that you could have treated and didn't. Because if it gets too far along. There's not many tools that we have to fix advanced heart failure. And 5% of us will go to transplant, but 95% will not. And 95% are treatable with medications or devices.
Mhm.
I am dropping the mic.
Well, even going through all of that, I want to um talk about and share from my experience if anyone had a upbringing like mine. So I was raised in a household with a single mom. Shout out to my mom because she did amazing. Hey, mama. But I was one of four children. My mom was single, and she raised us. So I went through life as a child without that father presence, and a lot of households experience a one parent home, and it has led me to not having that connection with my paternal side. So
Right.
now that my brother has passed and trying to build my family history tree, what I'm finding, is, and what I've heard is that on my paternal side, I've had a family member that has had open heart surgery. I've had family members on my paternal side who have had heart attacks. Um, and now I've decided, it took me a minute, but I struggled with that. Is it important enough for me to try to connect with my paternal side just to get this information? Or how would I do that? We don't have a relationship. So what does that look like, going up to family members who you don't have a real connection to and saying, hey, who had a stroke, who had a heart attack, what is your doctor diagnose you with? Like, what did your doctor diagnose you with? What did grandma die from? My grandmother on my paternal side is deceased, and I never knew her. So I don't know what she died from. My mother doesn't know what she died from. So I had to go on this, and it made it even more difficult after losing my brother because of how things transpired with my paternal side. So it kind of pushed me a little further away. And now I've gotten to the point where I feel like I need to reach out. And I actually did take the first step. Lisa, you will be proud of me. I reached out just not too long ago to an aunt and a cousin. I haven't received a response back, but I did take that first step. But when I tell you my brother passed in 2021 and I'm just now taking that step,
Hey,
it every time I thought about doing it, it caused anxiety, because if anyone's like me and you lack that connection from either your paternal or your maternal side, but you are finding out that you have a risk of heart disease, it is very it's very difficult, and it can cause anxiety and panic to either decide if you want to find out, or if you just want to continue just trusting your doctors to pick up on things. And for me, the decision for me was to just go ahead and bite the bullet, just reach out. And if they want to share, they will, and if they don't, that's fine. But at least I know I have that peace of knowing that I at least tried to get that information. And you never know, it could be time to do some reconciliation there. Because it's been decades for me since I've had any type of connection or conversation with my paternal side of the family. I we keep up with a few of the cousins and whatnot, social media. So that's how I even reached out, through social media. I send a message, let them know, hey, this is why I'm reaching out. I love to have a conversation to see if there's any insight that you can share, because I'm trying to build my family health history tree, and go from there. But it's the same with my maternal side as well. I have a connection with them, but what I'm meeting on that side is just people just are afraid to have the conversation. And for whatever reason, it's like you said earlier on, it's just respecting people's boundaries, people's decisions, and just moving and going with what you can get, what you have access to. But for me, the decision for me was to at least make the attempt, and see where it goes.
That is amazing. That is personal growth. That is a level of maturity that I really admire. And I'm not sure how many people can get there that quickly. You think it's a long time from 21 to 24? I think you went fast, girl. You went fast. And there are, face it, everybody. I work with 20,000 families with HCM. I have yet to see a functional family in the way that we think they're supposed to be. Everybody's dysfunctional in their own way, right? We
Mhm,
all have our own issues, communication styles, baggage. We're all families,
mhm,
and there are there are big traumas and little traumas in every family. And when you are a single parent home, and there has been a detachment from a parental figure, whether it be by choice, by circumstance, or by death. Okay, so somebody is in a different country. They can't get back here. They're incarcerated. They're choosing not to be part of a life. They are having multiple families at one time. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff out there.
mhm,
And breaking through all of the stuff to get to the essence of biology and being. We're not blaming anybody. We're not trying to give anybody anything bad. We're telling you, heighten your awareness. There's a medical condition that could potentially run through your part of the family tree too. We're not trying to stir up old animosities, but here's some data. That's one of the hardest conversations I think a person can have because of the multi leveled trauma that could be
mhm,
present,
mhm,
the grief that is present, but it's an important conversation for some people to have. I don't have really tight connections with some of my cousins who I know the genetic line goes through, but I try to provide them with information so that they can take the best care of themselves as they see fit. But they're going to do what they're going to do.
mhm. Yeah.
And your your ability to even send a social media message to a family member in this circumstance is really amazing, wonderful, positive, and even if they don't get back to you, you've led the horse to water. If they choose to drink or not is up to them.
Mhm.
You've
Yeah.
done good things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really all for my children. We focus a lot on, leaving financial wealth and things for our successors, our children, our lineage, our seeds. But what about the health side of that? We are also, when you bring other children into the world and you build families, you want to have them prepared. You want to prepare them and make them well-rounded all across the board, not just financially, not just with the education. If you want them to be successful and go out and keep up the the family legacy financially, education, college, businesses and all of that. How can you go to college and run businesses if your health is not on point, so
Exactly.
so we want to, for me, I want to make sure that my children are equipped and are knowledgeable on what they need to be discussing, because once I transfer my children from their pediatrician to their own family doctor, they're going to be building a relationship with their doctor based off of, what they know. And I want to make sure they know and they have the information that they need to to keep up with their health, to make sure that they are seeing the, having the conversations and seeing the right specialty for whatever will keep them healthy and keep them here for a long time.
I think that is very well stated and exactly where we as an organization want to go in the future. We're actually going to be adding a feature to our intake process, and that will be for you, the client, to bequeath your file to your children or whomever you want. So that in the event something happened to you, any information that you shared with us will immediately be held and be available for the person that you determine it's going to be bequeathed to. Stay tuned for more information on that. They'll be sending out consents in the next few months. We're still working on some details there. But you're 100% right. Why go through all this work and build this family history to have it only last for this moment in time? This has to live with you. So I think you're going to really like some of the projects we have coming up because this is exactly what we're thinking. And it's because we have such great ambassadors and thinkers from different places. They all throw these ideas together and we're like, oh, how do we operationalize that? How do we bring that to life? So we're able to do that in a lot of ways. So I would like to end today by saying we'd like to have you come back in a couple months and talk to us again and see where things have evolved to, and follow this process. As part of being one of our ambassadors and our Share Your Story program, we don't want to bring you a picture of a person who's out living their life, doing their hobby, and say, this is life with HCM. We want you to come along with us on this journey. And there's different parts of the journey. There's it's time to screen the kids journey. There's time to just get some work and do some advocacy work. And then there's times to develop new processes for the future. And Lekeshia, you've been so wonderful to work with this whole way. And it's phenomenal to have your perspective, your point of view, your lived experience. And it's going to help us be a better organization and serve more people more appropriately. So we look forward to having you come back. And we
I'm
thank you
excited
so much.
about it.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us today on Tales from the Heart, a podcast from the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association. And we look forward to updates from Atlanta, Georgia, or that region.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Y'all have
you.
a good one.